April 2026. Oil is at $100 a barrel. Iranian drones are hitting the infrastructure of the United Arab Emirates. Tankers are stuck in the Strait of Hormuz. The entire Persian Gulf is on edge. And right in the middle of all of this, one of the world's biggest oil producers stands up, walks to the door, and leaves OPEC. Rising Energy said that UAE's departure removes quotas indirectly, one of the core pillars underpinning OPEC's ability to manage the market. Saudi Arabia's former senior oil advisor went on Al Jazeera and said it's not a major blow. That's exactly what someone says when it is. Al Jazeera's own analysts called it not a technical dispute about quotas, but the expression of a deep strategic contradiction between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi. So which is it? A neutral event? A historical fracture? The smartest move in the Gulf oil politics in decades? By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what happened, why it was inevitable, and what it means for anyone with money on this market. But first, we need to go back, because to understand why this makes sense, you need to understand something most people get completely wrong. My name is Evgenia, and on my channel I talk about Dubai real estate and anything that can affect it, including geopolitics and microeconomics. In this video, a geopolitical thriller, a secret war between two Gulf rivals, a pipeline that changed everything, and $60 billion a year that was quietly disappearing. 3 questions. Why did the UAE make this move and why now? What happens to oil prices and the global energy order? And what does it mean for anyone with money on this market? Let's start with something most people get completely wrong. How is the price of oil actually set? Most people think oil price works like this. War breaks out, less oil, price goes up, simple. But that's about only 30% of the story. There are 2 types of prices you need to know. First, spot price, what a barrel costs today, delivered tomorrow. And futures price, what traders think a barrel will cost in 3, 6, or 12 months. And the futures market is where the real action is. And it's not run by oil ministers flying to Vienna for their quarterly meetings at OPEC headquarters. Austria, by the way, is not an oil-producing country, not an OPEC member. Chosen in 1965 precisely because Austria was neutral. When you need Iran, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and Iraq to sit in the same room without anyone feeling like they're an enemy territory, you pick the city that belongs to nobody. But back to the price. The futures market is run by hedge funds, trading desks, and algorithms in New York and London, people who have never ever seen an oil well in their lives. When Goldman Sachs publishes a report saying, we expect supply disruption in Q3, the price moves. Before a single barrel changes hands. Before a single decision is made in any Gulf capital. Now at the dollar. Oil is priced in US dollars. This means 2 things. 1, when the dollar weakens, oil automatically gets more expensive even if nothing else changes. 2, every country that needs oil first needs dollars, which means global demand for dollars stayed artificially high as long as oil is priced in dollars. This is called the petrodollar system, and it's running since 1974. And UAE's exit quietly pokes at this system in ways almost nobody's talking about. We'll come back to that, stay till the end. You might think the biggest influence on oil price is Saudi Arabia, the swing producer, the one who turns the tap on and off. But there is one player everyone forgets. One player that has quietly become more powerful than anyone publicly admits. Understanding who that is changes everything about how you read the story. We'll get there, but first, 1960, because nothing happening today makes sense without understanding why OPEC was born. Baghdad, 5 countries around the table. Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela. One thing in common, all sitting in oceans of oil. However, all essentially broke. How is that possible? Well, because the oil wasn't really theirs. 7 Western companies, the 7 sisters, controlled everything. Standard Oil, BP, Shell, Gulf, Texaco. They owned the drilling rights, the pipelines, the refineries, the tankers. They set the price. They decided what each country received. Venezuela, pumping oil since 1920s, was getting less per barrel than New York taxi driver was paying at the pump. So these 5 countries created OPEC, not to get rich, to stop being robbed. Now here is where most people get the history wrong. Those who remember, 1973 was the moment when OPEC became powerful. Arab members cut off oil to countries supporting Israel in the Yom Kippur War. Prices quadrupled, long lines at gas stations. President Nixon asking Americans to turn down their thermostats. Most people think that was about the war, but it wasn't. The war was the trigger. The embargo was the proof of the concept. For the first time, producing countries looked at consuming countries and said, we can do this, we have the power and you cannot stop us. Within 2 years, most OPEC members had nationalized their oil industries entirely. The wells, the pipelines, the refineries, all back under national control. But here is the problem with cartels. They work beautiful in theory, but in practice, everyone cheats. OPEC runs on quotas. Every member gets a production ceiling, pump this many barrels per day, not one more. The logic is simple: to limit supply collectively. Price stays high, everyone earns more. The problem is equally simple too. If everyone else limits production and I quietly pump a little extra, I earn even more. And if my economy is struggling, my government needs cash, my population is restless, that little extra becomes a lot extra very fast. And here is something OPEC will never officially admit. Every member cheats, all of them, not occasionally, inevitably. Saudi Arabia knows, everyone knows, the entire organization runs on one polite fiction, that everyone is following the rules. Iraq pumps over quota, reconstruction money. Nigeria pumps over quota, pipeline leaks we cannot control. Venezuela pumps under quota, but only because their infrastructure collapsed. Kazakhstan, the member of OPEC Plus, takes the prize in this. Missed quota targets for years. Official explanation is technical issue in Tengiz field. Real explanation: contracts with Western oil companies that legally require them to pump at full capacity regardless of what OPEC decides. So why does OPEC still exist if everyone cheats? Because even an imperfect cartel beats no cartel. Even with chronic cheating, coordinated production is more profitable than a full-price war where everyone pumps maximum and prices collapse to $30 per barrel. This is why Russia was invited in 2016 to form OPEC+. Russia was never a member, but it is the world's second largest producer. Having them outside pumping freely, undercutting every time OPEC tried to coordinate, was destabilizing the whole system. Saudi Arabia made a deal. Russia joins, agrees to coordinate, gets a seat at the table. It worked. For a while. But there was one member that had been quietly furious for years. A member who invested billions building capacity, who watched Iraq and Russia blow past quotas with zero consequences, who had done everything right and was being punished for this. In 2021, they finally said it out loud, in the middle of a Vienna meeting, and the room was silent. The UAE has been the most frustrated member of OPEC for the last decade. Here is the core of it. OPEC quotas are anchored to historical baselines. The UAE's was set in 2018, when capacity was around 3.2 million barrels per day. Since then, ADNOC, Abu Dhabi national oil company, invested over $50 billion upgrading the infrastructure. New wells, new pipelines, expanded export terminals. As a result, by 2026, UAE can produce 4.8 million barrels per day. Their OPEC quota? Still like in 2018. That gap between what they can produce and what they're allowed to produce costs the UAE between $40 to $60 billion per year. While Iraq cheats freely, while Russia ignores targets, while everyone bends the rules, UAE, one of the most disciplined members, sits on capacity it cannot touch. But here is the detail that almost nobody is talking about. The UAE has a pipeline that bypasses the Strait of Hormuz entirely. It runs directly from Abu Dhabi to a port on the Arabian Sea, Fujairah. Full export capacity, completely outside of Gulf. Kuwait doesn't have this. Iraq doesn't. Iran doesn't. Qatar doesn't. Only the UAE built themselves a complete alternative export rule, which means Iranian drones in the Gulf, missiles near shipping lanes, conflict close in Hormuz. None of that touches UAE exports. They already had the door. They just needed to decide to walk through it. And now they have. So in 2021, OPEC was negotiating a new production schedule. The UAE agreed to the overall framework, but pushed for a higher baseline to reflect its increased production capacity. The talks briefly collapsed, one of the most visible fractures in OPEC Plus in recent years. However, a compromise was eventually reached. The UAE secured a partial revision and the deal moved forward. But the tension never really went away. It just moved out of public view. Most analysts framed this as a technical dispute about baseline calculations, but in reality it was not. Al Jazeera this week put it plainly: this is not a tactical dispute. It is the expression of a deep strategic contradiction. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are not allies with occasional disagreements. They are rivals with occasional cooperation. And that gap has been widening for years. Both are racing for the same foreign investment. Both building financial hubs, tourism, technology sectors. Both want to dominate the Gulf economy in a post-oil world. In Yemen, they back different parties. At one point, UAE backed forces that were fighting Saudi-backed forces on the same battlefield. Then Iran started hitting UAE territory directly, drones on infrastructure, missiles near shipping lanes. And so, with oil at $100 per barrel, with the Gulf on fire, with Saudi Arabia having just forced the dissolution of the UAE's proxy forces in Yemen, Abu Dhabi made its move. Which brings us back to the paradox. Let's run the numbers because the financial logic is almost embarrassingly clear. UAE OPEC quota is 3.2 million barrels per day. UAE actual capacity is 4.8 million barrels per day. The gap is 1.6 million barrels. At $100 per barrel, this is about $160 million per day. Per year, nearly $60 billion. This is what staying in OPEC was costing them annually. Now there is a layer nobody's saying out loud. UAE doesn't believe oil will be at $100 per barrel forever. Nobody in Abu Dhabi believes that. They have been investing in renewables, tourism, finance, AI infrastructure, precisely because they know that petrodollar era has an expiration date. And the UAE's calculation is brutally simple. They have maybe 10 to 15 years of high-priced, high-demand oil left. Every year constrained by OPEC quotas is revenue we can never recover. Every barrel we don't pump at $100 a barrel, we might eventually pump at $40 or not pump at all. So yes, they are living at $100 oil. Because $100 per barrel is exactly when you want to be pumping at full capacity. And there is one more dimension almost no Western media is covering. Remember that forgotten player from part 1. It is the United States. Al Jazeera analysts put it plainly: UAE is purchasing American strategic goodwill with barrels. At the precise moment when its regional alliance framework is collapsing and it needs a new security guarantee. The Trump administration explicitly linked American military support to the Gulf to oil prices. Lower prices, more production, less dependence on the OPEC Plus architecture that kept prices high enough to fund Russia's war in Ukraine. UAE just gave Washington exactly what it wanted. From a cartel that served Saudi and Russian interests to a production strategy that serves American economic interests. Whether that's good or bad depends entirely on which side of the equation you are in. And in return, UAE gets what it needs most right now: American support. And here is where it gets really interesting for anyone watching global money flows. If OPEC continue to fragment, and it probably will, we won't have one global oil price anymore. We will have regional pricing, a New York price, a Beijing price, a price set in Mumbai, in Moscow, in Abu Dhabi. The unified petrodollar system that shaped the entire second half of the 20th century will be replaced by something more fragmented, more multipolar, harder to control from any single point. For the UAE sitting at the crossroads between East and West, with China as their largest trading partner and America as the security guarantor, that fragmented world is not a threat, it's an advantage. So what that move actually means for the UAE economy? Free production without quotas means more oil revenue for the UAE, of course. ADNOC pumps more, state earns more, budget expands. That money goes into infrastructure, new districts, the things that make Dubai attractive to the new wave of expats. More expats, more housing demand, your investment appreciates. In the long term, that signal matters a lot. So this way, the UAE is converting oil wealth into a diversified economy, while the oil is still worth something. Dubai 2040 Urban Master Plan, Abu Dhabi Economic Vision are not marketing slogans. The roadmap for where $60 billion in additional annual oil revenue is going into the skyline you're looking at right now. Capital from the region historically flows into Dubai during instability, not out. And UAE, that controls its own policy, its own production, its own revenue stream, is more stable, more attractive destination for global capital. OPEC was built by weak countries trying to survive powerful ones. UAE left because they no longer feel weak. And if you're putting money into Dubai real estate, that's exactly the kind of country you want on your site. Subscribe. This is where global politics meets your square meter.